Alright, hey everybody, this is Bao. Welcome to Trust Improvement video number 15. And this will be the first video where I will actually be sharing the video after this to the outside world. So this is the first public video, first one. So that means, like I promised, there's a camera and you can see my office with the bed and the teddy bear sheets. Ignore that. And don't ask about the backwards chair or anything. That's none of your business. But yeah, so we finally have the first video, and I guess since there are actually going to be viewers watching this, I should explain what this series is about. I am like a 1300 player on Elite Chess, and I've been playing for about 2.5 years now, and I'm not very good, but I decided that it'd be fun to try a video series by a beginner for beginners, where I will try to improve and progress in a very conscious and strategic way. And so I wanted to try, and I guess mostly for my benefit more than anybody else's, to try and have fun, but also figure out a strategy. Oh, this is all going south already. But to figure out a strategy for getting better in a very specific method. And so recently I've been working on tactical motifs. That's what chess video, all of the improvement videos before this have been about. And we'll continue on that path. But for today, since it's a beginning and there might be some new viewers checking this video out, I thought I'd start with maiden ones and we'd go from there. Lately I've been doing tactical motifs specifically for forks, and if you want to check that out, that's the last 2 or 3 videos, and before that we were working on pins. But don't worry if you don't have to go back and watch those, although they are semi-entertaining. So if you're curious, please do check them out, and if you hate them, leave a comment. If you hate this one, leave a comment as well. But yeah, we will be going all the way back to the beginning and trying to do it as well. And don't mind me picking my nose, that's also none of your business. With that out of the way, let's get started. So we want to do maiden ones today, and I'm on Chess Tempo, and that's what I've been using because they have a wonderful system for setting up specific chess problems. For instance, with the tactic tags, you can add in any specific tactic that Chess Tempo has categorized as relevant, or you can also set number of moves, total attempts for all users, extraneous other things. So yeah, that's why I've been using Chess Tempo. Another tool we've been using is the Chess Kings app. It's mostly for the phone, but they have a desktop version if you have the app on the phone that you can use on the desktop. It's not great, but they do provide a different way of learning. Specifically very, very easy puzzles of certain sorts that you just kind of do over and over again until you just kind of stick it into your brain. Just shove it right in there. So yeah, I'll be using both tools, and later on, once I get better, I'll probably we'll move on to something like Lichess and do general tactical puzzles as well. But for now, yeah, wanted to use Chess Tempo. There has been an issue recently where I can't seem to choose, like, here are all my custom sets, but Chess Tempo in their beta mode has not been letting me choose the set that I will be using from my custom sets. So if we go into the chess tactics. At the beginning, it asks you which problem set you want to use, and you say change set. And usually under the non-rated stuff, there is a whole section for personal sets that you can use. And it would show the whole list of my custom sets, but it's not working. So the only workaround that I've seen, or that I've figured out, is to literally kind of remake the set each time, which for the tactical motifs, that's good, and I'll explain that when we get to that later. But yeah, for something like this, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a hack, and I hope they fix it. I could like tweet them or something, but I haven't because I'm lazy. Whatever. But yeah, so right now we've set it to only mates, one move, and the quality, I remember I set it to something. I guess I have from 1 to 5. That's fine. Whatever. We'll do all quality of mate puzzles. That's like 4,750. We'll probably do... We'll see how quickly I start doing the mates. And yeah, so if we save this, then I think it also... Oh, they give you an option for start solve. Ah, god damn it, it disappeared. Yes, there's swearing on the show, so if you want your chess without the swearing, sorry, but yeah, there'll be swearing. There'll be inappropriate things said. Some of the videos I've had to delete before because I said some really stupid things. But yeah, so we'll save the mate in one set and we'll start solving and we'll see how it goes. What? Or we won't, because it won't let me. That's also good. It's a good way to start the first public video. This is actually really good that you get to watch me kind of like suffer through this. I'm just gonna delete the whole set. Let's fucking do it. Alright, we're gonna do it. We're gonna create a new set. Mate and ones. Set as current set. Okay, now. Great. Okay, so let's set as that. Oh, did I just fuck up? I fucked up again. Oh, jeez. Okay, so delete that. Delete that again. Have all of the settings correctly. Do the search. Wow, 8,870 puzzles. Huh. Oh, mates and non-mates. Gotcha. Do a search again. 4,700 blah blah blah. Previous attempts. Let's set it for all problems that I have never tried or never got right. So do the search for that. Wow, I've done quite a bit of the mate in one puzzles. Okay. Then we did all of that searchy, and then we create the set, and now we say mate in one, set as current set. Okay, and we'll see if it works. Ah, there we go. Okay, so here we go. We're started now, and basically the general idea of these videos is for me to just go through the puzzles slowly and explain what I see, and if there's any calculation needed to do all of the necessary calculations. But today with mate in ones, I don't think that's going to be necessary. But yeah, the idea is I have seen benefits from explaining to a third party that doesn't exist of how I'm looking at these puzzles, and to myself, especially with the calculations. I've found with harder puzzles, as I calculate through them and explaining it to the viewer, that my skills have in real games have gotten much better. So the idea is to kind of do that over all the videos to improve my own skills. And yeah, hope you enjoy, because I think there are things that one can take away about what I'm doing right or wrong. Be inspired. I don't know. Just fuck it. I'm done. I'm done explaining shit. So let's take a look at this puzzle. So first thing I think about is queen to e6. However, that leaves the d5 space open for the king to run away, which ain't so good. Another thing I am thinking about is something like queen to f5. That will block the control the space d5 for the king's flight square. It also takes care of the f file, and he doesn't have d4 or e3 to run away from. One thanks to his bishop or his rook, and the other thanks to my pawn. And that seems to be the answer in this puzzle. This is a line where the queen and the king are right next to each other on a diagonal. This line comes up a lot, or not this line, but this kind of mating pattern shows up a lot, where because of the close diagonal, you're closing down a crap ton of files, specifically all of the row and the file and this diagonal, which incidentally kind of looks like an arrow pointing towards h8, kind of, I guess. And generally the only flight squares are the diagonal, not the diagonal, the row and the file next to the king away from the queen. But usually in those mating patterns, what you see is that they are blocked for some reason. So yeah, we'll probably see that a lot tonight. But here's the first puzzle. So yeah, that was kind of long explanation, but it'll get quicker as we continue on tonight. So the idea, as I'm trying to sell you on this whole video series, will be that in later segments, in later videos, today we're only doing mating. We're doing simple maiden ones, just as an introductory video. But next video, we'll go back into tactical motifs, and the first one we'll be looking at will be pins. And the idea will be for us to go through each tactical motif for quite a while, because this isn't really just an intro series to you, the viewer, but more of a practice video for me. And so until I feel like I'm getting very good with a specific tactical motif, we're just going to keep on doing them. And we'll probably visit mates again at some point, because maiden 2s, maiden 3s, maiden 1s even are just so important as a beginning player. Or at least that's what I believe. I could be wrong. And of course, anything that I believe is important for myself in learning doesn't necessarily mean that they're good for you as a player either. But we don't have to get into that right now. I feel like we should just have fun. Do some mates, do some puzzles, get things wrong, be really embarrassed. So in this puzzle, queen takes rook. Oops, sorry about that. Queen takes rook seems like the right idea. King doesn't have any flight squares. The only flight square he really has would be h2, but it's defended or controlled by my knight there. So yeah, that just looks like a very simple mate. And yeah, 2 out of 2. Let's keep going. So white's made a move. f1 looks really good for my queen. King would have no flight squares available. Are there any potential blocks or other pieces, other white pieces defending? No. So since we have the bishop on d3 defending that f1 square, we can just move our queen there without being worried about the king taking, and the king, as I said, has no flight squares. So there we go. That's another maiden 1. Hup, hup, onward. This one's kind of fun. I think it's very pretty. The 7th row is all taken up by my rook, so that's awesome. The queen, if she moves to h5, puts the king in check, and there is really no flight square that he can use, and there's nothing that can distract my queen or take my queen. So yeah, that will also be a mate. Maiden 1s are fun, but I don't know. Sometimes they can get tricky, but yeah, they can become a little bit easy, or what's the word, kind of grindy after a bit of time. So we'll only do this for this video today, and hopefully next video we'll get back into the more fun puzzles. I'm very excited to go back into the tactical motifs, actually, because I've really been kind of surprised by how much I've been learning by kind of inundating myself with those puzzles. That being said, rook to g8 looks good. Rook g8 is defended by my knight on e7. Puts the king in check. His flight square on h7 is taken away by my knight, and I control the g file, so that looks pretty good. Black just made a move. Rook is defended by my queen. Where is the checkmate? Oh. Let's see. Looks like queen to d6 almost looks good. We have the e8 tile. Is tile the right word? For some reason that doesn't sound like the right word. Anyway, we have the e8 square. There we go. Wow. Under control thanks to the rook. However, the f7 square is a flight square for the king. And this is that kind of pattern that we're talking about where the queen is diagonal to the king. This time the arrow is, I guess, going this way for how much area that the queen controls. All of the d file, all of the 6th row, specifically these 5 tiles that the king can move to are all controlled by us, and the f8 square as well, thanks to the queen's diagonal. But yeah, the e8 and f7 are what we're worried about. So instead of going to d6 and trying to do the arrow that way, pointing that way, we can actually move the queen to f6, and we'll do the same thing, except this time we are also X-ray defending our rook on d8, and our rook on d8 is still controlling the e8 square, and not only that, now he's also controlling that other flight square that the king would be going to on d7. So that's neat. That's very pretty. Okay, white to move. And rook takes f7 seems to be the answer, because our other rook is controlling the g file, so no flight square there. And the e8 square is controlled by our knight. And of course, if our rook is on the f or the 7th row, king doesn't have any flight there. I just want to hold for a second and make sure that there aren't any of black's pieces that can take my rook. There are not, so that's a checkmate. And yeah, I think last time we did mate in 1 videos, or I think it might have been pin videos, there are definitely some lessons that I learn over the course of time. Just certain things about taking my time, checking to make sure I don't have any contenders that can for controlled spaces and whatnot, looking at alternative lines. But for mate in 1s, I don't think I have to use too many of those learned lessons from my mistakes necessarily, but yeah, they'll come back to haunt me when I start going too fast. Queen to g2 looks like the right answer. Nothing can take my queen, and when the queen is hugging the king like that on the edge of the board, or when there is no other row for the king to back up away from, that is just yeah, that's checkmate. 8 out of 8. So these are going fairly quickly. I think what I might do is get to 15 out of 15, and then we might move to mate in 2s. Because as much as I like mate in 1s, I think... I don't know. Is that a... is that a wise move? We'll see. We'll get to 15 out of 15, and then we'll see. Usually when I've been doing the tactical patterns, I've been going to 25 problems recently. But yeah, we'll see if we want to switch over or something like that. So this is slightly trickier. Black's just moved. I was gonna say rook to h8 looks pretty good. Taking all of that h file, and then we have the flight square on the g file with the queen. But rook to h8 is just met by a rook takes rook on h8, so that's not very neat. Another one that I would love would be queen to g7, but there's rook takes queen on g7, so that's not good either. Okay, so what do we have? Possibly we can do a checkmate with our knight as well. For instance, we do like knight to f6. Wait, that's not f6. Wow, that's just completely wrong. Knight to g5 puts the check on the king, and he has no flight squares on the 8th row, and his only flight square on the 7th row is controlled by our queen. However, then there's king to h6, so why don't we check out, instead of knight to g5, let's try knight to f8, in which case there would be a potential flight square for the king on g8. So, like, that's really close, but not quite. Interesting. Dun 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 dun. So this is a tricky one. Maybe maiden ones are a-okay. The pawn on g6 for him is defended by his queen, so that's also good. Maybe there's a potential of some kind of abusing a pin or an overloaded piece. I don't necessarily see it. If we could get the queen to g8, boy, wouldn't that be great? Oh, I guess the simple answer is just queen to h8. That took me quite a while. Queen to h8 can't be taken by the rook thanks to my rook. H-file, again, just like the rook being on h8, is taken by the queen, and the queen still maintains that control on the g7 square. And so then the king has no place to go, and that will be checkmate. Oof. So yeah, maybe I shouldn't be so rash to say maiden ones aren't useful, because that gave me a little something to think about, if you know what I mean. Yeah. This one's fairly easy. Queen to g3. Even if the pawn hadn't moved, we could have done queen to g3, and then the pawn is defending the queen, and the queen is defending the pawn, which is great. And then because the queen is hugging the king on the edge, and he has no way to move away from her, that's checkmate. Okay, black's just made a move, and it looks like this is a classic rook and king endgame kind of situation. The king is already on the edge of the board, which would happen, which we would try to maneuver in the rook endgame. And then he doesn't have any flight squares right now on the 7th row, thanks to the king as well as this pawn controlling c8, so that means once the rook moves to g8, king has nowhere to go, and that's checkmate. And let's just hold off for a second to ensure there's no way for any of the black's pieces to get him. No, there isn't. And that is a-okay. Okay. So white's just made a move. Oh. Let's take a look for a second. First thing I see is queen to f2. I'm sorry, I'm so tired today. F2 looks really good because the two flight squares that the king would normally use when the opponent's queen is hugging from a non-diagonal, so vertical or horizontal square, would be to move diagonally away, but those two spaces are right now controlled by this f pawn here. So yeah, once queen moves over to f2, no flight squares diagonally from the queen, so g3 and e3 are taken, and then thanks to this pawn, as we said, none of these squares, and then of course this file is still under the queen's control, so that's excellent. And I should have held on for a second to wonder if the queen had any way of destroying my queen. No, it's a mate in one. There's always going to be some kind of easy answer. This would definitely be one of those times when I have to be careful. If I just did queen to a4, not only could the bishop take, but the king could take as well. So, but there is a very simple answer in this one, is just to take the rook. Haha, just kidding. Queen to a2, the queen and the rook defend each other, and clearly the king has no place to go. So there's that. 13 out of 13. 2 more puzzles. Number 14. Yes, this is the pattern that I was talking about 2 puzzles before. Queen goes to b7, hugging the king on a horizontal square. The king has to move vertically away, or diagonally away. However, both of those squares are right now occupied by his own other pieces, which means there are no flight squares for the king. Hey. Yeah, so with maiden ones, I often find that I just end up looking at flight squares a lot for the king. I just choose a random check or a potential mate scenario, just a check basically, and then just start seeing, hey, are there any flight squares? And how does that relate to using this in real chess game? So far, I have been very bad about being able to utilize my mating skills to actually implement a checkmate. I think that kind of skill actually starts becoming more and more useful. Ooh, maybe I should lower my mic a little bit. Apologies if it's been too loud. But I have found... Oh, so yeah, continuing on that thought. I think maiden ones don't necessarily help me find ways to implement checkmates. However, I have found that it does help me defend against very blatant checkmate potentials that can happen to me. Furthermore, I think once I get into like maiden 3s or 4s, I will find once I become very good with those, I think I will find that checkmate scenarios become more and more potentially clearer to see. But yeah, we'll see if that's true. That's a hypothesis. I don't know if it's true. I think it would be interesting to see. I would be interested to see if maiden 2s, for example, once I master those or get fairly decent with those, I wonder if that will help me start thinking about mate threats of my own that I can use in real life games as well. But for now, maiden 1's helping me defend against instantly losing the game. That sounds pretty good. Can't really complain about that. So in this scenario, queen to h2. None of his pieces can take care of my queen. My queen is defended by the bishop on d6. King has no flight squares. Yada, yada, yada. That looks good. That's 15 out of 15. So yeah, here we are at, I don't know, 20 minutes into the video after I've yapped a bit. I've taken it a little quickly today, I think mostly because I'm very excited about having the camera in my face and also thinking about the fact that this is going to be shared on Anarchy Chess. But I think there is some value to continuing on with maiden 1s. However, in my personal life, as I've sat on the pooper often, I've been doing maiden 1 puzzles. That is a weird thing to admit on camera. Yes, I do touch my phone on the pooper, and yes, one day I will end up with pink eye, probably because of that. But because I've done so many maiden 1s using the Chess Kings app, I'm close to having done, I think, like, at this point, close to 1,000 maiden ones, and then we saw another 200 done on chess tempo. I think for today we'll take a rest on the maiden ones, and maybe we can move to some maiden twos. That might be nice. Let's do that. Ooh, not a number of attempts. Well, I was the first attempt, so yeah, there we go. So yeah, if we want to move to maiden twos because of the issues chess tempo is having, we're gonna have to go to our custom sets, manage sets, delete the maiden twos. Close that. Number of moves to twos. Only mates. Do a search. 9,100. Wow, that's a lot of maiden two puzzles. Right. And we also want to only do problems I have never got right. So that's, I've done about 200 maiden twos on chess tempo as well. Huh, interesting. Didn't know I did that many on chess tempo. But yeah, so now that we have the right filters, let's create a set. Made in tools. Set as current. Awesome. And we'll start solving those. And I should just take a breath. Slow the fuck down. And we'll start on the second part of the video. So, maiden twos. Now I get to show how embarrassingly bad I am. I don't remember who said this. A YouTube chess personality, I think, of some sort, said that while looking for mates, it's best to think about, or for any multi-problem puzzle, to think about where we want our pieces exactly before, or where we would like our mate pieces to be, and then try to work the puzzle backwards from there. So, like in this scenario, I would really like my queen on h2. So the first thought that comes to mind is like, hey, why not bishop to g2? Because of a pin on the pawn and the king with my queen. On the h-file, the pawn couldn't take that bishop. And then if the white pieces weren't able to defend correctly, then that would be a maiden one afterwards. However, in this scenario, we don't want to forget about the fact that our king is also in a very dangerous situation here. In fact, so dangerous that if we don't do a forced move right now, after pawn to e7, our king cannot defend against this pawn moving down by moving to f8 because of the pawn. The only legit move we'd have would be like rook to f7, bishop takes, king takes, promote, take, and I don't know. That's a bishop for a rook. That ain't so good. So yeah, we gotta be careful about this pawn movement here. So we want to look for a forced move. And if we're starting to think about forced movement mates, obviously we have to sacrifice a queen. That's always the right answer, and in this case it actually is the right answer. Because of the way the bishop is guarding the G file, or actually specifically G1 and G3, the king doesn't have a flight square for G1 there. So if we force the queen to take, king goes to H2 to take the queen, then rook to H4, check, and as we said, with the bishop controlling these two dark squares, king has no flight squares, and queen can't take our bishop, rook can't do shit, no time for this pawn move, so that looks pretty fucking good. Alright, so maiden twos are fun, a little bit more calculation, this is pretty good. I would say let's do about 10 maiden twos for tonight, and let's see how awful I look doing them. That sounds pretty awesome. In this situation, because I only really have 2 pieces to use and some handful of pawns for this mating net, I don't think there's going to be any sacrifices. First thing that I see as a potential would be like knight to g5 check. Flight squares on the second row are taken, so the king has to push in towards the knight to either h4 or h4, because g4 is taken controlled by my pawn on f5. So once that happens, excuse me, I have rook to h2. King can't go back to h3. That's not a square. g4 controlled by the pawn. Yep. And then my knight's on g5, protected by that pawn, so that seems to be the answer. Neat. Okay. So far, so good. And honestly, when we are talking about mate, when we are talking about wow, I just lost my train of thought there. When we were talking about mate puzzles, and when we want to revisit them, when we do revisit them, I would like to kind of do what I tried to do a long time ago on a stream. It was one stream, and it actually went pretty well. I shared it on chess, r/chess, and like 2 or 3 people came and visited and watched me. But the idea was to do mating puzzles while looking at the board as a whole. It was more of a practice for board reading more than it was for trying to memorize or inundate myself with mating patterns. So when I do get back to mating patterns, I would like to do that instead of just going through mating patterns. But yeah, that's something for the future. Don't have to worry about it. Just me trying to fucking sell these videos again, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, let's keep on going. So black's moved. Queen to f8 check looks really, really good. I didn't take into account king to h7 afterwards. However, after that, we would have rook takes h6 check. And I don't think the king will have any flight squares. But I don't know if there are any defenses against this. So queen to f8 check. I think it's a forced move for the king there. No way of attacking my queen. No way of getting in between. Too close. So that's good. And then rook to h6. If we're over here, there are no flight squares on the 8th row. No flight squares for the king on the 7th row. And my rook's defended by the queen. No way for the queen or the rook to take my rook. And yeah, no flight squares on the 6th row. So that looks pretty terrible for the king. Oh, thank God I'm stopping at 10 puzzles. I'm starting to suddenly feel really, really odd in my stomach right now. I cooked myself dinner and I didn't follow a recipe today. I just took whatever was in my freezer, did a very kind of like old man Asian style of thing. I don't know if any of you are Asian, but we have a lot of frozen random shit in Asian freezers, like dumplings and fish cakes and whatnot. And instead of like actually deciding on a traditional meal or anything healthy, I decided let's just fucking put everything into a frying pan and cook it, and I'm just not feeling very good anymore. I'll be honest. I think I have to destroy my toilet. But we'll finish this. We'll do 10 puzzles. 7 more puzzles and we'll be done. Okay. Continuing on. So, rook takes f6. King has no flight squares. So the only thing he can do at that point is bishop to f6. Bishop takes f6, which opens us up at that point for queen to g8 check. However, then there's king to e7. So that's not quite it, but I really like where that's going. Oh my god, I'm gonna die. Okay. An alternative would be queen takes, but queen takes f6 comes with both. Oh, Jesus. Bishop takes or rook takes. So that doesn't look great. Another idea would be to start with queen to g8 check, king takes, and then what do we have? I have no fucking clue. I don't think that's it either. This is a little bit trickier of a puzzle. Let's start with rook takes f6 and calculate all potential lines. And then if we don't see anything, we'll try rook to g7 as the second candidate move. So rook takes f6. No squares for the king. Bishop has to take. There is queen to g8, or there is rook takes f6. If queen to g8 check, there is king to e7, like we said before. If rook takes, then there is king to g7. And after that, there is queen to f7, but that would be a mate in 3, not a mate in 2. So that's not efficient. Are those the only two possible moves? Rook takes knight f6, bishop takes rook f6. No other pieces are really in this puzzle besides them. And if we're not careful and we don't do a forced move, my queen's just going to be taken by the rook. So, like, honestly, rook takes g7 doesn't seem promising because rook takes g7. King doesn't have to do anything at that point. Rook takes e6 is very, very good. And then the knight on f6 is defended once more. So that doesn't seem like it. So rook takes g7 is just right out. That doesn't seem good at all. Queen takes rook on b6. That's also right out because there's queen takes queen. Rook takes knight. Bishop takes rook. I really feel like there's something there, but I really can't see it. That is tricky as fuck. Rook takes bishop, rook takes queen. Rook takes knight, rook takes rook. Nope. Queen takes knight f6. Rook takes queen f6. Rook takes rook f6. Bishop takes rook f6. Rook takes bishop f6. Two minor pieces for the queen is basically what we're saying, and that doesn't look very good. So there's rook on f5 takes f6, but there's also rook on g6 takes f6. So we've been thinking about this the whole time, but why don't we think about this for a little bit? Rook takes, bishop takes. Ah, God, we're in the same place before. Where if we do this... Is there a pin that I'm not seeing? No. I don't think so. I don't think so. Rook on GC... Rook on G6 takes F6. Bishop takes. Rook takes F6. King to G7. Queen to F7, mate. No, not mate. Close to mate, but not mate. Oh, fuck. But that does let us take the rook on B6, actually. That'd be pretty good. I'd be down with that endgame. Wait, what endgame is that? Take, 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 take. Take, 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 check, move, take, take, take. We would be evening out the game. We are down 2 minor pieces right now, so that would be pretty nice, but that's definitely not what we're trying to do here. Okay. So, the knight is pinned. There is a knight pin. That is a truth. So we don't necessarily have to worry about the knight. Okay. So if that's the case, what do we have that we can use? The knight is defending, or should be defending, the h7, the g8, the e8, and the d7 squares. But because he's pinned, he actually can't do that. So if that's true, who can go to one of those spaces and still be defended enough to attack the king? Of course, that would be our queen, but g8 is not defended by our rook. I wish queen to f7 check was a thing as well. But it's not. And if we don't force a move, then our queen is going to get taken. It's going to get captured. Rook takes knight, bishop takes knight. Oh, I'm such a dumb dick. So earlier, when we were doing maiden ones, there was one specific puzzle where we had this mating pattern that I didn't recognize now. But let me just do the puzzle and then I'll explain from there. Rook takes knight, bishop takes knight, rook goes up to g8, and that's the checkmate. And this pattern is... This is wrong because there's that flight square. However, the idea is while the queen maintains control of the e file there and the... Well, this row is irrelevant because the king can't go there. But while I guess the queen is controlling this diagonal for the king's flight squares, as well as this e file, the rook can go and take care of some of the last flight squares necessary for the king to be in checkmate. And I just had to see this fucking thing that I didn't see. So 4 out of 4. That took a while. But yeah, that whenever there's a queen and rook mate thing going on, I really need to get more observant about seeing that pattern. That's not an easy pattern for me to see. So leave me alone. You're just nothing but big meanie. Okay, so this is maiden 2. Keep our mind in the game here. What do I see? I see one flight square basically for the king. And it's this F5. So an idea I have is a non-forced move, soft move, silent move, quiet move. That's the word. It's not silent, because a silent move, I wouldn't make a move at all. I wish that was a thing for Zugzwings, but yeah, so pawn to g4. Pawn g4 looks pretty good, huh? Taking away more flight squares for the king. Our pawn on f3 is defended by our rook. Question is there any kind of dangerous move that can be made afterwards to force a move from us? There's something like knight c3, rook c1, but neither of those moves matter because right after whatever they do, there is bishop to g3 check. And it's mate, actually, because there's no place to go. So the question would be, if I make this pawn move, is there a force moved on my king? No. There is, however, some consideration that should be taken about the idea that pawns can also move. So on g4, there is e4. But on e4, that doesn't matter because the two specific light squares that we wanted control for are still intact. And when the bishop comes into g3 for the checkmate, it controls all of the dark squares, and so the king still has no place to go. So I think that's the right answer. Let me take just another second to make sure that there's no moves that can force us into a shittier scenario with our king. And I don't think there is, so I think I'll go with it. Nice. I don't know what that rook move is about. Okay. Well, that rook move is interesting. That's cool. And yeah, 5 out of 5. I'm waiting for the puzzle where I'll get it wrong. Okay, so queen to f6. Queen takes f6 check looks really good. That leaves him with two potential places to go. Either d7 or e8. I don't have a clue of what to do after that. But I do like the idea of taking the knight, so I guess we'll just continue on with that line and see if there's anything worthwhile to invest in. Queen takes knight f6. Let's start with king to e8. There's rook to g8, but then there is king to d6, which don't look so hot. I mean, afterwards there's queen takes pawn, and the king has to continue running around like an idiot. So that's cool. But I think he just goes to c8. And then, yeah, we're kind of losing our edge. I mean, there's bishop to f5 afterwards, king to b8, and then rook takes rook, and king to king to a7. Trade down at that point, because I think, like, we're up, right? Yeah, we're up. Ooh, no, we're not necessarily up. We'd be even, I think, on pieces. That wouldn't be a bad place to be. But that obviously is not it. Queen takes e8. No, nothing. Nada. Zilch. Zero. Zucchini. Here's an interesting idea of, like, bishop to f8 check. Oh, let's keep on going with this line, though. So the e8... actually, we don't have to go on with the line if e8 doesn't work, clearly. If one of the lines doesn't work, then what am I hoping for there? So let's move on to something else then. There is the idea of queen to e5. Queen to e5 gets rid of e8. F8 is impossible thanks to our bishop. There is... At that point, that would be... Oh my god, I'm sorry. Apologies for all of the yawning. King to d7. And then I've lost most coordination with my pieces. Oh! Ah, that's pretty. Okay. So I think that is the answer. Queen to e5. King moves over to d7. And then there's bishop to f5. I was about to say I've lost all coordination with my pieces, but that little bishop there, that's quite helpful. None of the light squares from c8 to h3 are now possible for the king. None of the dark squares, the diagonal next to it, are possible either. And because the queen is on the e-file, none of the e-file squares are possible either. So as we do this now, we just have to calculate to see if there's any distractions or moves to defend against that to get in our way of the king. So queen to e5, king over to d7, bishop over to f4, kings on d7. Can the bishop block? No. Can the queen block? No. Can he move over here? No. Can you move there? No. You can't go there again. There's no blocking. Okay, that looks like the answer. Very, very nice. Okay, 6 out of 6. 4 more puzzles. Here we go. We're getting it. We're getting it. Okay. I'm thinking, like, first thought that would come to me is rook to h7, but then king just takes the bishop, and that's a big no-no. So then we think of something like, how about rook to g6? Then our bishop is also defended, so the only way to get in the way of this check would be for the knight to get in the way, or the pawn. So like pawn to f6 would be really good, actually, in that scenario. Then bishop has to take, knight takes, then he's out of the checkmate, so that's no good. But I like that idea, like moving the rook down, pawn goes, pawn goes, pawn goes. And then if there was a way to keep our defense on the bishop while also being able to move our knight laterally on our rows, that'd be sweet. That'd be really, really sweet. Incidentally, another idea I could have is like rook takes, forcing the pawn to take, because if the pawn doesn't take, my next move is rook to h7, which is straight up checkmate. And quite a delicious one at that. So much coordination going on, it's insane. But rook takes knight, pawn takes rook. Oh, hey, I think I got it. Okay, so the idea here is... Oh, never mind. I thought I had it, but I didn't have it. Damn. Damn, damn, damn. My thought was, instead of moving my rook on this file, why don't I move my rook on this row? But then I realized I'm not defending the bishop anymore. So another thing we could do potentially with this check is rook first to take the knight on g4. Rook takes, and then pawn. But then it's more moves now to move the rook over to the h file and to take that stupid pawn. But I want to do it now. Check. King moves or pawn. Rook takes knight g4, pawn moves. Our rook is here. So close, and yet so far. So if we take with the rook down here, pawn has to take. That pawn on f7 is just such a bummer. It is such a fucking bummer. The double check with the rook on h7 is so sweet. But our bishop on g8 is in such trouble. Oh, I have an idea. What about if we just rotate our bishop a little bit? We rotate our... Ooh, no. Why would I think that's the idea? That's not the idea. Bums! Bums, I say. I was thinking for some reason that if we move the bishop from g8 over to h7, then we can do the double check with the rook and the bishop on the king, and the king would have no place to go. But he can always still take the bishop. So that's not it. That ain't it. Rook takes knight. Rook on g7 takes knight on g4. Check. Pawn to f6. And then I've got fucking nothing. Rook on g1 takes rook on g4. Pawn takes rook. Rook takes f7. That's no good. Okay, so what if in this line we just do the double check first? Right? Rook to h7. King is forced to take the bishop. Oh, okay. And then rook to h8. Thanks to the pawn on f7, which I called such a bummer, and because of the bishop controlling the dark squares, now the king doesn't have any place to go. So all of this over on the king's side bottom is just a red herring. We can just take care of it with our 3 coordinated pieces here. So we just move here, and then king is forced to take that, and then we move there, and the king has no place to go. Très bien. Wow, you are not a bummer. You're a good pawn. You're a good pawn. Okay. 7 out of 7. 3 more to go. Let's do this shit. Let's fucking do this shit. So what do we have? We have queen takes knight. That looks pretty awesome. How are they going to defend? Oh, no. Okay. I see the answer. Queen takes knight comes with creating a flight square, so we don't want to do that. I was going to say, how are they going to defend against my queen back mating, or back mating? Oh god, back end mating the king. But of course, he can just create a flight square, and he can also probably maneuver his pieces to be able to get into G7. Maybe, yes, I think he can. No, he can't. So he would have to go for a Luft. Luft. But in actuality, it's just a simple queen sacrifice. Oh god, they don't have things. Oh. Session details? Oh no, that's not it. I don't want session details. I thought this was hopefully like line maneuvering, like in Lee chess. It's not. But anyway, it's queen sacrifice on c8. c8 check. Bishop has to take. I mean, there's also queen blocks, but then there's takes, and then nothing else can block. So check, bishop takes, and then rook to f8. If queen blocks, then we take the queen, and it's checkmate as well. So there we go. That's 8 out of 8. It's a nice, nice, nice. Ooh, and this is a simple one. I like. I'm thinking pawn move. If king to g8, then bishop to f6. If any actual move, it's just bishop to f6. So that's nice. One day I would like to be able to make that happen. I hear this only usually happens if the opponent helps you get into a checkmate scenario. But one day. I've gotten the smothered mate once, and so this would be the next thing that I would want to do. I also forgot that the camera was on. I hope I didn't touch myself too much in a weird way. Ugh, embarrassing. What can you do? Let's see. First thing I see is queen to f5. That's restricting a lot of squares. A lot of squares for the king. In fact, he would only have two different choices. h6 is clearly the worst of the choices, so h4 seems to be the only choice. At which point there's queen to h5, and that looks like checkmate. Yay! And that's 10 out of 10. Congratulations, congratulations. So, yeah. That was a lot of fun, actually. I really like mate in twos. I still feel like there is a calculation barrier that I'm slowly getting better at with mate in twos, and I really want to do more mate in twos because, as I said halfway through the mate in one puzzles, the mate in ones help me see potential mates, but mate in twos really feel like I'm getting closer to the idea of potentially starting to utilize those mates. And that being said, I know I'm just doing like general tactical motifs right now, but if we look in the custom set tags here, open this up here. Oh my god, I forgot how bad my insights felt for a second. You'll see that chess tempo is very good about tagging all of the different types of mates. So once we finish, excuse me, with all of the tactical motifs, it might be a really good idea to go through all of the mating motifs as well. And when we get to that, I guess we can start incorporating books as well. And in fact, I would really like to incorporate more books into the training as well. The mating book I'm specifically talking about is How to Defeat Your Dad at Chess or something similar to that. That is just literally like a 200-page book with just mate puzzles, mating puzzles everywhere. And what better to get better with motifs than to just drill them into your head. As much as I don't like the idea of drilling over abstract understanding, then utilizing that tool over and over to get better at it, in chess, it seems like drilling is one of the tool sets that you need to refine before you can start utilizing the tools. It's like memorizing vocab words. Chess to me is a lot like writing a story with two people, right? A chess game, if you think about it as writing a story with two different people, then the moves are like the words, and each move has a purpose. Each word has a purpose. Or are the pieces the words? The analogy breaks down very easily here. If the pieces are the words and the squares, what are the squares? Is it like the piece of paper? I don't know. But then the moves are like the sentences, I guess. And then with each move, you're trying to say something. And between the both of you making moves, you write a lot of sentences down, and then potentially you end up with a whole story. But if you aren't very refined with the holy shit, this analogy completely breaks down because I was saying that the tactical motifs are like vocabulary. Anyway, forget about it. Whatever. Doesn't fucking matter. I think you get the idea though. These are the tool sets that we need memorized within us to become better at playing the game. If they are refined enough and we're able to readily use them in a game, that means we can use more of that time instead of trying to figure out a motif. We can use for actual calculations and instantly spot if a calculation is potentially good or bad. Yeah, it's late. I have to poop. I really have to poop. But thanks for watching this video. And yeah, if you liked it, great. If you didn't like it, great as well. I don't really give a shit. Please do leave comments though, either way, like or dislike. I appreciate the feedback, especially since this is like my first real video. And yeah, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Don't actually do those things if you don't want this. I'll be sharing this often enough. Every like 5 games I'll probably try to share this on one of the chess subreddits somewhere, so don't feel like you have to subscribe and pay attention to any of this, because yeah, I'll come back to you, so don't worry about it. But if you feel like subscribing, fine. I come out with a video probably twice a week, once to twice a week. And yeah, this is what we'll be doing. Just puzzles, trying to get better, and focusing on different motifs. That being said, there's nothing else, so get the fuck out of here. Ah.